Hey, Flimsy Lunch Tray here, and today we're going to be talking about the Buffalo, which is a Tier 9 heavy cruiser, American cruiser, and I like her. I enjoy playing her a lot, and as such, we're going to be looking at her upgrades and the commander skills, commander build. I'm going to share a couple different variations of a few different type of builds you could do, and then I'll share with you what is my preferred build. Naturally, this is all just my opinion. So in looking at the Buffalo, she is a pretty cool ship. She's kind of standard, but she's also at the same time different. Definitely a step up once you move from Baltimore to the Buffalo. One is when you look at the artillery, it's the same from my understanding, but compared to Baltimore, you get only one turret on the stern, where on Buffalo you get a nut two. So you're getting 4 guns versus just the 3. So in being a heavy cruiser, she's pretty bulky versus, of course, the light cruiser line, like Seattle. She's got this 27 millimeter plating on her fore end, the armor belts, and also on the aft end plating, where you can see the 16 millimeter in dealing with the superstructure. And then also you can see the turrets on the side. They're much more prone to getting knocked out when looking at the armor plating versus the front, but a bit more beefy at 229 millimeter. And then you move down to the Citadel armor belts. So let's take away some things here. So when you're looking at Citadel, you can see that in the midsection, it does raise a bit. You do have these 2 other areas where you get some other plating. But yeah, Buffaloes tend to die quickly when you show too much side. Not as quickly as maybe something like a Seattle, like the light cruiser. So it's always really good to utilize angling in when we're dealing with the Buffalo. But because she's a heavy cruiser, particularly if you want to utilize her radar, ideally you want to push in and provide radar coverage of caps and strategic areas and helping your team win the game. So let's go ahead and look the ship over. So when we look at modules, you can see that she has 2 upgrades. She's got the Buffalo B hull and also the Mark 9 modification 2. So basically, when we're looking at the hull, you can see that pretty significant survivability boost, going from 42,500 to 47,800, as well as the AA defense increase and the maneuverability of the ship increasing as well. So that's really important to get. The base gunfire control system you have is a range of 14.1 kilometers, or you can step that up to 15.6 kilometers. Looking at the upgrades, you have 6 slots for the Buffalo once you hit Tier 9 from coming up from Baltimore. The first, you've got the traditional 3 options. I recommend taking main armaments modification 1 because it reduces the risk of your main battery and your torpedo tubes, which you don't have on the Buffalo, but reduces the risk of your main battery from becoming incapacitated by negative 20%, and also increases the survivability by 50%, and also the main battery repair time, if those main turrets should get knocked out, negative 20%. So your guns are back online faster. At the same time, if you do want to invest more into your secondary and AA mount survivability, you can. When you're looking at the secondary armament, it has a range of 7.3 kilometers. That's before we add the secondary flag on. That would give that a slight boost. And also increasing survivability of AA, which if you're going for more of an AA build, you could go for that, but I like to focus on the tried and true traditional main battery guns. You don't need main magazine modification 1. I always say this just because when you look at your signals. You get to this combat signal Juliet Charlie, which completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. And so you should always be taking this when you're playing randoms, ranked clan battles, and so forth. So you can use main armaments modification 1. For slot 2, you get the traditional damage control system modification 1, which reduces the risk of fire and flooding by -5% for fire and -3% for risk of flooding. And then you have the engine room protection, so this protects your engine and your steering gears from becoming incapacitated, and if they do become incapacitated, it increases the repair time. I like to get the surveillance radar modification 1 because it increases the action time of the surveillance radar consumable, which you have down here, and that alone boosts us, I believe it is from the 30 seconds without it to 42 seconds. So that is really beneficial. It helps you keep enemy ships spotted for longer, such as destroyers or maybe even a cruiser like a Neptune or something in a smoke screen. So you can eliminate any potential risk. You know, you kind of saw how we belayed some of the ships, the Neptune and the enemy Akazuki, I believe it was, in yesterday's video, being Buffalo Teamwork Sacred Arts. So I can put that video in the description below, so you can kind of see this current build in action. And the way to get the surveillance radar modification 1, if you're uncertain about that, is you go to the armory, and there's going to be an icon on the side once this loads. Yes, here, customizations, where you can see upgrades, and you have the surveillance radar modification 1, and you can see it says it goes on slot 2, and you can use the coupon and acquire it for 12,750 coal. So I gladly run this on all my radar ships because I want my radar to last as long as possible, and so I'm okay with a slight risk of maybe catching fire or flooding more, but it's a small percentage. For slot 3, you have a couple of options you could go for. You have the main battery modification 2, which increases the traverse speed of the main turrets. I do have that skill mastered as of now, called Grease the Gears. So when we look at the traverse speed of the main battery, we can see that the 180-degree turn time is 30 seconds. So if you took this, well, you're 24 seconds or something, 23, something like that. Not entirely sure. You have the secondary battery modification 1, which increases your secondary battery firing range by plus 20% and reduces dispersion of your secondary battery shells. You could go for this if you want to. I've actually killed a couple of destroyers and ships, surprisingly, with my secondary battery. So they're a bit more viable than what I first perceived, but at the same time, it's not the first option I would go for. You have AA Guns Modification 1, so if you want to set your cruiser up to being more of an AA cruiser, you can take this skill. For myself, I like to go for some of these things I'll call the tried and true Aiming Systems Modification 1, which increases the firing accuracy of the main battery and secondary battery, accelerates the traverse speed of torpedo tubes, which we don't have, and extends the firing range of the secondary battery. So you get a bonus to your main battery and your secondary battery when you take this. And so the dispersion of your main battery shells is reduced by -7%, which is quite nice. And we can see we get the range buff to the secondary battery and also a dispersion buff to the secondary battery as well. Because I really like having those tight groups, especially when I'm firing at something like destroyers or trying to get a kill shot on a cruiser. Light cruiser, that would be. For slot 3, you have damage control system modification 2, which it reduces or accelerates the fire extinguishing and recovery time from flooding by -15%. And then you have steering gears, so your rudder shift time is reduced. So right now our rudder shift time is 11.2 seconds. So if you took that, you'd be looking at something like 2.4 seconds being taken off, so 8 point something, 8.8 seconds rotor shift time, I think, if I'm doing math correctly. We'll see. I'm not good on the fly. And then you have propulsion modification 1, which I like to take, which time taken to reach full engine power when accelerating, negative 50%. Sometimes, you'll be kind of working alongside an island, hugging an island, putting pressure on a cap with your radar, and sometimes you might back out a little too far, and there's an enemy battleship that notices and tries to lob shells in, and maybe even kills you. So being able to have the propulsion modification and boost back forward, or trying to dodge some shells, I like having that. For the 5th slot, I like to take concealment system modification. Right now, with this, as well as concealment expert mastered, we are looking at an 11 kilometer detectability range by sea, 6.5 by air. But if we also add a camouflage on, your concealment will drop to 10.7, which is nice in the sense that it shortens your window between your 10 kilometer surveillance radar range to 10.7 detectability range by sea. So you have a 0.7 kilometer range perhaps when you're dealing with an enemy destroyer cruiser. So if you're out in open water, if you spam the radar button the first thing as soon as you get detected, you still have a longer time duration before you could pick up the enemy ship. I am going to talk about a second potential option, being steering gears modification 2. It reduces the rudder shift time and accelerates the repair of steering gears. So your rudder shift time goes by negative 40%, and your steering gears repair time, if they should be knocked out, is reduced by 80%. This could be an option. I do know of another YouTuber who actually uses this, but he doesn't go for concealment, he goes for that, and then instead of taking main battery modification 3, he takes gunfire control system. So that increases your main battery firing range by 16%, which then you're looking at 18 kilometers for your main battery range. As is right now, you have a 15.6 kilometer range for your main battery. So if you kind of want to diss concealment, I would recommend going for something like steering gears modification 2 and gunfire control system. If you want to, if you're more focused on that concealment and want to be able to reach out and hit targets further. For myself, I'm a bit more traditionalist in the sense when it comes to Buffalo that I like to take the main battery modification 3 upgrade, which the main battery reload time is negative 12%. So that means you go from having a 12-second reload time on your main battery to a 10.6 second reload time on your main battery. I like to focus a little bit more on the DPM, so that's what I go for. And then your main battery traverse speed gets nerfed by negative 13%, and you saw that means 180-degree turn time of 30 seconds. Also, when you look at the consumables, I guess I should also talk about auxiliary armaments modification 2. So if you do want to go for a more AA build on the Buffalo, there's going to be some other skills we're going to show in the commander skills. You could also take auxiliary armaments modification 2. So your secondary battery reload time is reduced, your continuous AA damage and damage from AA explosions increases. Right now we can see when you're looking at this that let's see, continuous AA damage increased by 15%. I'll pull my calculator up. 257 times 1.15. Yeah, so then your AA damage goes up from 357 to 410. And then damage from AA shell explosions. So 1610 is what that is. So 1610 times 1.15. You go up to 1,851 damage from shell explosions. And then you also get number of explosions produced by salvos fired from your AA defenses, and when the defensive AA fire consumable is active. Furthermore, with that, when you look at the consumables, we have the options between hydroacoustic search and defensive AA. So you can really begin to turn the ship more into an AA build, and then maybe, if you're just all out about that, you can even throw fighters on. If you're going for a range with your main battery at the same time, you can also take spotting aircraft. That's going to increase your main battery firing range by 20 seconds, by 20%. So if we were dealing with an 18 kilometer range, if you went for the gunfire control system, you could buff that out even further to additional 3.6. So that would be 21.6 range. So I don't really see that typically from Buffalo in game, but if you do want to focus in on that, you're more than welcome to. But I like to focus on strategic areas on the map with the radar and spotting enemy targets, and having a hydroacoustic search to help keep me and surrounding teammates protected and alert of any possible incoming torpedoes. So you kind of have options. You've got the range option you can do, you've got the AA option you can do, or you have this a little bit more of a traditional option that I'm doing here. So there's potentially a lot of options with Buffalo, and it's 16 minutes in and we still haven't even got to the commander. So we need to get into the commander. So when we're looking at skills for cruisers, currently I have a 16 point commander. This is how I would advise you to use your first 10 skill points. First, you're going to want to take Grease the Gears, which your main battery traverse speed is increased by 15%, which gives us that 30-second to 180-degree turn time. Secondly, I would recommend taking Priority Targets, because your survivability is pretty important, I would say, as a cruiser, especially the American cruiser line, in my opinion. So being able to know if you're getting into a sticky situation, or if the ships you're dealing with in front of you, none of them are targeting you, and all of a sudden you get a 1 on you, maybe that tells you there's a destroyer, or maybe there's even a battleship, 18, 20 kilometers away looking to target you. So it gives you a little bit more situational awareness. So priority target is never bad in my books. For the third, 6-point commander, I would actually recommend taking Superintendent. This gives you an additional heal, it gives you additional radar, and it gives you additional hydroacoustic search with the current consumables that we have now. So I like taking this because, if the match draws out, then you're going to wish you had that additional heal, or maybe even additional radar or hydroacoustic search when dealing with an enemy destroyer towards the end of the game. And then I would recommend taking Concealment Experts. As you saw with the camouflage, we get down to a 10.7 kilometer when we make this all a concealment build, a more traditional build, I would say, for the Buffalo, versus the other two options we've highlighted, being the range and an AA build. So after 10 points, I'd recommend taking Adrenaline Rush. So that's a 13-point commander. What this does is it enhances the ship parameters for each 1% of HP loss, which means your main battery reload time, your secondary battery reload time, and your AA damage all get increased. So your main battery reload time reloads faster, so it's a buff as along with your secondary battery, and then your continuous AA damage increases. But usually when you've taken damage, that means maybe you've lost some of your AA survivability. So it makes you still a bit more potent if you do take some of that traditional HE damage throughout the game. With a 16-point commander, then I would recommend taking Heavy AP Shells. So it's an attack skill, and the damage of your main battery, that your AP shells with a main battery caliber of 190 millimeters and above, is increased by plus 5%. And the Baltimore, Buffalo, Des Moines, they all have 2 and 3 millimeter guns. So we meet that requirement. So that's 16 points. For your 17th point, I would recommend taking a gun feeder. And so this reduces the main battery time, the time taking the switch between shell types when all main battery guns are loaded. So you'd go from that 10.6 second switch, if you do switch between that, which you'll often find yourself doing in American cruisers, to a 5.3 second time. So that is really nice. And even in the battle that's going to be in the description with the Buffalo, you could see how that actually would have helped me in a couple of cases in having this. So for me, this is what I would say would be a really good 17-point build for the Buffalo. And then I would say there's 3, maybe there's 4 ways you could go after this. The way I intend to go with my 17 point and then spending my last 4 points, I'm actually thinking about going at this point in time, this is what I believe I'm going to do, is I'm going to go for the AA Gunner, a defense skill. So the continuous AA damage and the damage from AA shell explosions is increased by plus 20%. So if we look over here, we've dropped AA defense, the bar down, and we get a list here. We can see that our continuous damage now is 357, and the damage by shell explosions is 1,610. Now watch what happens when I click on this. That's a pretty reasonable, sizable buff there. So our continuous damage increases to 428, and the damage by shell explosions increases to 1,932. Now, when we're talking about combat signals, which I take this every time I go into battle, is I take the November Echo Set 7 combat signal, which increases your continuous AA damage and damage from AA shell explosions. So we take that, mount that signal. We can already see, should have gone up. Just want to make sure it's not thinking all crazy like. Well, let's mount. Because I feel like I should be seeing that number increase. So it's weird. Now when I throw this on, it's actually over 2,000 now. So I don't know why it doesn't just list it straight up. It shows you what you have. But then when we throw AA Gunner on, you can see now we're up to 450, and we've break 2,000 and 2,029. And that's without the flag mounted. So I don't know why it doesn't show the difference once you've mounted this signal. 357, 1610. Because again, when we're looking at this and then we add this on, you can see 428, 1932. Oh, okay. I'm blind. I'm sorry, guys. It is changing. 357 to 375 and 1610 to 1690. Typical flimsy move. So yeah, so that goes up, and then again, my point was, with my last 4-point build, or 4 points, I intend to go with AA Gunner. Because, you know, you'll be enjoying, maybe you're hunkered up alongside an island, and you're providing radar coverage on a cap, and the enemy carrier decides, hey, I want to delete this cruiser that's providing this radar coverage over sea. I want my destroyer to get in. Having that additional AA is nice in dealing with dive bombers, rocket planes, or torpedo planes. So if they don't have a full squadron, you can potentially take them out before they even fully get to you. So this build is what I intend to do with a 21-point commander. Now, a few other options you could potentially go for. Let's say you want your radar and hydroacoustic search to last longer, or yeah, because that's the only 2 things that this engine consumables enhancement affects, is that you get a 10% buff to the hydroacoustic search and radar. So for us, that means our 42-second radar goes to add 4 seconds, 46.2, I think that would be. And then your hydro goes from 100 seconds to 110 seconds. So if you want to have that little extra edge, you could take this, which means you only have 2 skill points left. And then I would recommend going with Expert AA Marksman. So you get an additional shell explosion in your AA salvo, and those already have a 90% of hit probability. So potentially putting up some more damage, as well as your priority AA sector time is increased by 25%, so that means you can pop it back up again faster after it's cooled down. So that would be a second option you could do. Another, let's say another could be, let's say you just don't like dealing with destroyers, or you want to know if there's a ship pushing upon you, say you're behind an island or something. You could take the radiolocation skill, and so this skill, once you master it, the player will have the direction to the nearest enemy ship indicated to them, but the enemy player will be alerted that a bearing was taken on their ship. That's like a little located icon that spawns here, roughly in the middle of the battle. You could take that. That could be helpful. Let's say that you went with the build that didn't focus on concealment. You went for range, as an example. You could potentially take this top grade gunner skill. And so what this does is that it has the permanent effect that your secondary battery reload time is buffed. So you can see the kind of secondaries kind of keep coming back up in conversation. They have a 6-second reload right now. This would bring it down to 5.4 seconds. But then the can be activated is that increases the reload speed of the main battery if there's a visible ship within your ship's standard detectability range. It causes the ship's detectability caused by firing, changes to ship detectability caused by firing main guns, fires on board, and other combat events are not taken into account. So your main battery reload time is buffed by -8%. So you're almost getting the same buff when you are detected within your ship's standard detectability range, which means, like right now, my standard detectability range is 10.7. So that means that they can be activated. My guns will reload 8% faster, which would take, let's see, 10.6 seconds to, let's say, 6 and 9. No, just above 9.2, 9.3 second reload time. So you could take this if that's what suits your fancy. If you forsake the concealment route, that could be a viable option as well. And then if you're not going with the concealment route, then you can take the concealment expert off and then, for example, put AA gunner on. So then you're even increasing your AA capabilities that much more as an option. So you've got the option that I plan to go with, which is this, the more standard routes. If you want to have a longer lasting radar hydroacoustic search, you could do that. If you want to know where a ship is nearest to your location, you could take radiolocation. And then if you want to go with more of an anti-concealment build, then I would recommend taking the top grade gunner, and then you drop concealment expert and go with AA gunner. So those are, I'd say, within the commander skills. Those are the 4 options you could do. I would say if I was to rank them in order of what I think is the best, I mean, if I'm taking this, then that kind of means I think this is the best route for myself to go. Just my opinion, how I played Buffalo. The second route, I could see, it would be almost maybe be a tie for me between the radiolocation and then with an anti-concealment build with the top grade gunner and the AA gunner. Those would that'd be tied, because it'd be fun to maybe even test that out sometime with doing an anti-concealment build, range build, and AA build on your Buffalo. And then lastly, my bottom bucket recommendation would be doing that. Of the 4 different options that I've showed, remember that we did spend a lot of time looking at the equipment on Buffalo, looking at the different options that you could take on. Particularly slot 5 and slot 6, in addition to when you're looking at your consumables such as defensive AA or fighter spotting aircraft. Yes, but I like to use radar. I like to kind of get in and help support my team with dealing with strategic areas. That's the traditional Buffalo build that you will see in the game. So why don't I recommend taking these others? I don't recommend incoming fire alert because our recommendation is you take priority targets. Last stand, it's a defense skill. I just don't recommend taking it because you've already have. Where is that? Oh, I was taking engine room protection if you wanted to take that. If you're worried about your engine steering gears becoming incapacitated, it doesn't happen to me, honestly, very often. So I don't feel the need to take that. You have Power Technician, which increases the chance of your main battery and your secondary battery HE shells causing a fire on a target. I mean, you could even do that if you want to forego AA Gunner or Expert AA Marksman if you're thinking about that. We talked about Expert AA Marksman. Heavy HE and sap shells. So the damage of your main battery, your HE shells, do 10% more damage. But your detectability range with the main battery caliber above 149 millimeters is increased by 15%. So if you were really going with an anti-concealment build and you want your AP and your HE to be deadly between this heavy AP shells and this one, you could do this. Maybe that means you give up. What would I give up if I was going to go for this? If I was going for that anti-concealment build and I really wanted to take heavy HE AP shells. I mean, the heals are nice. It'd give you extra fighter, extra defensive AA fire consumable. Maybe you would give up Adrenaline Rush, but I like Adrenaline Rush. So if you really want to take this, maybe I would just say, if you feel comfortable with giving up an additional heal and things, then yeah, then give up Superintendent, and then maybe give up Adrenaline Rush. So that's just a different build. I haven't tested it out, but I know for myself, my playstyle typically doesn't revolve around the anti-concealment builds when it comes to the American Cruiser line. We talked about Adrenaline Rush, we've talked about the heavy AP shells, we've talked about Superintendent. Survivability Expert really only belongs on destroyers. Yeah, there's only a few exceptions where you might take Survivability Expert on a cruiser such as Austin within the game, because she is tier 10 cruiser that has such a small HP pool. Anything you do to increase that might help you there. We talked about Top Grade Gunner. Outnumbered is just a bad skill. It's a good skill, but I would say it's a bad skill, because what this does is it improves your ship's characteristics if there are more visible enemy ships within the allies within the firing range, more visible enemy ships than allies within the firing range of your ship's main battery. So this usually means you're overextended on a flank, and that your health pool will typically evaporate rather quickly if you're trying to activate this can be activated skill. So I don't recommend it. We've talked about RPF, we've talked about Concealment Expert, and we've talked about AA Gunner. So there's a couple routes you could go, depending on how you like to play the American heavy cruiser line. For myself, it just tends to be more revolved around the traditional supporting my team, getting in closer with radar and my concealment. So this is what I would recommend. This is what I intend to take as a 21-point build on my Buffalo. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. And if you have already subscribed, really appreciate it. And thanks a lot as we continue to grow the channel here and drawing in on 200 subscribers as I record this. So until next time, take care.